Good evening and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bluddworth, and as you can see by the graphics, tonight's video is another installment of Dungeon Mastering Tips and Ideas that worked. So, as always, I always, preface this or disclaim that these are the methods and tips and ideas that have worked for me. In some cases, it might work for you. In other cases, it may not. So I'm not speaking as an expert. I'm just talking about what I have found works at my table, whether it's a virtual table or an in-person table and whatnot. But primarily, I'm virtual, right now anyway, as many of us are. So, what prompted this question? So, our question of the day is how to keep a large group orderly and engaged. So I was asked the question of, how do I keep such a large group, just organized in general. This was a question on my YouTube channel, and I believe it was one of the recaps for my AD&D First Edition game, and I have 9 players. So before I actually go into some of my ideas and share those, I just want to begin by saying it is not easy to run a game session with, I would say, more than 6 players, which I consider to be a large group. So I'm running with 9. I've had as many as 10 show up. It was originally supposed to be 12, which would have been nuts, quite honestly. And I probably would have struggled way too much for it and not had enjoyed it as much as I have been with 9. And 9 is still a challenge. And I don't always get it right. But these tips, if I follow them, would certainly help, and I think that you'll find them, potentially useful as well. So, let me get right into it. So, I actually just wrote it up and I thought, let me get my ideas formulated, and I kind of identified, what is the DM's choice, what is the players, participation in this as well, and then some just general ideas. So starting off with the DM. So how to keep a large group of players orderly and engaged. All right, which are sort of two things, but if the orderly happens, the engaged is a lot easier. If it's not orderly, the engaged is probably not going to happen either. Now, number one, I am a school teacher by profession, so I'm used to a classroom of individuals, students ranging, as high up as high school level as well. So, I'm used to 30 to 1, and usually teenagers. So 9 adults are a little bit easier than than 30 young adults, let's say. So part of that is the training of just knowing how to have eye contact with everybody, and how to make them all hopefully engage in whatever I'm teaching or doing or whatnot. So part of it is professional training. I've been doing that for 25 years, and so it certainly helps. It certainly lends itself to managing this here. So let me get to some of the points. So the DM must know the PCs, and that means their characters and then eventually the players. And when I say know the characters, I actually use Roll20, and I actually collect up, or at least print out, all of the character sheets. And it's helpful that they start off at first level for both the DM and for the players. And I'll get to the players portion of this as well, where that will become a little bit more clear. But as a DM, I need to know what character classes, what racial abilities in general the players are bringing to the table with their characters. So I have all the sheets, I looked them over, and I wanted to make sure that I knew, well, this is the half elf druid, and what is she carrying, what is her, what are her major attributes that might stand out that I might think about utilizing, and so on. Just general questions about what I could expect from this character. And like I said, and then eventually, once I learn the players well enough, I'll be able to also answer that question as well. What can I expect from this player playing this character under a number of situations? So I could start to try to anticipate some of their actions. And I take that anticipation, and when I'm creating an adventure, I try to keep some of those things in mind so that I know, well, here's a scenario that I'm creating, and here's how I think the magic user is going to react to this. And this is how I think the paladin is going to, potentially disagree with the magic user in this case, and maybe he is going to step forward and do something. Maybe the druid, she is going to see this in a completely different way, and possibly have a different solution. You got to look at all of your players and start thinking of them as a unit, and then start to see how they develop and start to work together. Or you might see how they don't work well together and try to create scenarios that will correct that. So that's the first thing. The DM must know about the player characters, and then about the players, and all about their capabilities and trends. Let's say the trends of how they behave within the group. The players, sorry, I gotta rub my eye. The players, they need to know their characters as well, even more so than the DM. This is why starting with a brand new, first level character, or even a 0 level character, is important for players to not just learn the game, but to learn how to master playing characters. When they start at low level, there's generally speaking, depending on your system, but in most systems, a first level character isn't very complicated. They have a few skills. They probably couldn't afford all of the equipment that they might want, and so they're going to pick and choose certain items that they'll probably always look to carry with them. And the player must know their character sheet. And when I say know their character sheet, they need to know what their hit points are. They need to know what their armor class is. They need to know what level they are, what spells they might have, what's their primary weapon. So what is their go-to weapon that they're almost always going to do. And they need to know that without looking at the sheet. All right. If they have to, with a first level character, can constantly consult their sheet, there needs to be some corrective, action on the part of the DM. Hey, listen, let me try to help you out. Start with just a little sticky note, something like this, and just write, turn your paper over, turn your character sheet over, and just write hit points, AC, level, a couple most important facts or details about your character and your character's abilities. Not about your character's background or anything like that. I just want to know the mechanical stats of your character on a simple little sheet here. And that's all that you need in front of you for this first session or two. Then eventually you could just get rid of this. You don't need it anymore. And you can now know your character right off the top of your head. First level character is very, very simple. Even for magic users or clerics or any of the spellcasters, It's fairly simple to know. These are my go-tos. So that's the player's responsibility, really, is to know their character, even more so than the DM knows the characters as well. Now the DM, next step, which I think really kind of helps me organize what's going on. And this is one of the things that occasionally I forget to follow up on and just keep in my mind. And so that's like I said, you're not going to be perfect. All right. Any game session, you're going to have great game sessions. You're going to have game sessions where you say, "Oh, you know what? I could have done that scenario differently, maybe better." You're always going to see room for improvement, and hopefully you'll keep on improving. But there's no perfection going on here. There's no if perfection is expected, you're you're doing the wrong thing. If a players are expecting their DM to be perfect, they're doing the wrong thing. If you're expecting the players to respond and act in a certain way, you're doing a wrong thing. So getting these things in order, though, I think helps organize just the flow and the action of what's going on. So the first thing I do is initiative order. I mean that's usually primarily the first thing that you want to think about is what's going to happen in combat. All right, and so we establish an initiative order, and I think most people will look at dexterity and say, all right, well, the highest dex. So if I have two melee combatants, all right, how do I know which one is going to go first? Well, the one with the dexterity bonus or the dexterity, the higher attribute score, is going to go first. Now, what if they're tied? All right, they both have a 16 dexterity. Well, I use the secondary of intelligence. All right, so dexterity is the primary, intelligence is the tiebreaker. So that's the only time that intelligence comes into play. Now, why do I choose intelligence or dexterity intelligence combo in primarily the combat situations? This could also be any physical action, but specifically combat. The dexterity is the obvious. The intelligence, I look at it as applying a tactic. All right, and so the person with a little bit more, intellectual knowledge will be able to read the situation and adopt a tactic that would give them an advantage over somebody else nearly equally capable as they are. And so that's why I use that as the change. The second part of this is the when it's not a physical action being done. All right, and so that comes into play where I look at either a leadership order or a declaration order. So leadership obviously is based on charisma, and so that's going to be the primary. So anytime that the players as a group are interacting with like an NPC, and we're trying to sort out, since there is 9 of them, we're trying to sort out, well, who's going to talk to the NPC first? Who is more likely to talk to the NPC first? Well, I'm going to give that declared action to the highest charisma, because that's typically the character that that would be much more forward, much more bold in what they're looking to looking to get involved in any kind of a social interaction. And so charisma becomes the primary. Wisdom is the tiebreaker. Again, kind of just having a sense of people and a sense of the situation, either from experience or whatnot. And so I use wisdom as as the tiebreaker. So now, in any given situation, you're looking at dexterity, you're looking at intelligence, you're looking at charisma, and you're looking at wisdom. All right, these are all of your mental, abilities, and so it actually helps encourage the players to think about their characters in those ways as well. It doesn't just come down to strength, dexterity, and constitution for every single situation. At least it shouldn't be the end all and be all. Um, it creates, charisma becomes something that's somewhat important now. So it's not the dump attribute any longer. If the player wants his or her character to be much more bold, or have an earlier say in the declaration phase. And that kind of segues right into the next point, and that's the round sequence. So, in many game systems, and obviously I'm talking mostly about Dungeons and Dragons, whatever edition, this is across all editions. It doesn't really, it's not dependent on any one particular edition. But I think most people, most DMs will consider the order again, missile, magic, and melee. So those are your three actions. You have the declaration that's always in the beginning. So that's when you go around and you ask each of the players, all right, what is your character going to try to do, or what is your character going to do? And then you'll go down the line. So when I talk about that declaration phase, and I'm talking about that second form of categorizing them or giving them a priority order, that's where the higher charisma is going to come into play. They are going to get to declare first. They might not be able to act first, but they'll be able to say, this is my intent. And I will ask the players sometimes, or the players will just say, I'm going to call out. I'm going to call my shot. I'm going to say, this is what I'm going to do, so that everybody hears me and they start coordinating with each other. Again, as I talked about very early on, we're going to focus on trying to get the players to function as a group, because the larger the group, the more that they have to act as a cohesive unit. Otherwise, their sheer numbers will work against them. All right. They have a better chance of steamrolling over lower challenges, especially combat challenges. But their sheer numbers could also become a big detriment to them as far as movement and such, because a large group is just harder to move through many situations. And that includes even in wilderness situations. They're not always going to be on a wide open flat field. In the woods, they could struggle with having 9 players trying to move through the woods either quickly or silently or whatnot. Just agilely, weaving through trees is going to be much more difficult when you have 9 players trying to do all of that at the same time. So now I do another part of the sequencing where there's a movement phase that usually comes in the combat sequence, and I allow the players to decide. They could do half movement now, half movement, after the melee portion of it. They could do all of their movement at first, and then, but that's as much as I partition it. It's like you're either going to do half and half, or all now, or all at the end of the sequence. So that's the first thing that I allow the players to decide. The other thing that I allow players to do is, let's say you have a magic user and a ranger, which I have in my group, and the ranger would normally fire his arrows before the magic user, but the ranger knows that the magic user is likely to cast a sleep spell here. So the ranger might hold off firing his arrows this round in case the magic user puts all of their opponents, let's say all of the kobolds, asleep. Or he might hold off, and if he has if the ranger has that higher charisma, and so he can declare sooner, and he has just the the higher dexterity where he was going to go first anyhow, and the weapon of choice is a missile weapon, he can actually delay his action without losing his action. So he's not going to lose initiative if he backs off because he is quicker both mentally in the situation and physically as well. And so he holds off. The magic user casts his spell. Oh, look, two kobolds weren't put to sleep by it. They weren't caught in the area of effect. And so now he knows, all right, I'm going to shoot my two arrows, one each at those two kobolds, and wipes them out. The players are going to begin, as they see that this is a very tactical way of handling combat, and or any kind of a situation, because like I said, this does work the same way in social interactions as well, with everyone declaring what they're going to do, and then there being a specific order that can go on. So with a large group of 6+, both the DM and the players need to know these orders of sequence. So again, I recommend that at least for a little while, the players jot it down, and I have a copy of the charts that are on my screen on Roll20, so that I can see the order that they're supposed to be in. And again, once in a while, you're going to forget that order and say, hey, wait a second, you missed somebody. All right, just happened in my last thing. Well, you went through 1, 2, or 3, and then we got involved in something, and you forgot to go through the rest of the 6. And then I was, all right, yeah, thank you for reminding me, and then went back through the rest of the 6 players. So just because you have a good idea written down on paper and it works, it doesn't mean that you're always going to actually apply it as best you can. So, just try to keep these things in order. It'll make your job a lot easier. So let me just finish up with the engagement piece. So how does this keep the players engaged? The players already know what they're capable of. They're going to start to learn what their other party members are capable of doing as well. They're going to start to think of these synergies and these, hey, wait a second, I know he's going to cast that spell, so I'm going to hold off. All right. That is a level of engagement that you're really looking to create, because now the players aren't just sitting there on their cell phone or doodling or doing whatever, or just, oh, well, it's not my turn yet, so I'm just going to wait. No, they're analyzing the situation as it's going, as it's going about, to see if they might need to adjust. All right. And so that's the kind of engagement that I hope to create when they're in situations and they're trying to think their way through something, or they're trying to fight their way through something. And I want them focused on what each of the other players are doing. And then that way their character can respond in the most useful and effective way. Otherwise, yes, 9 players can certainly devolve into chaos. We had one session where that kind of seemed to be the case. It kind of ran away a little bit on me, and and I had to remind myself afterwards. Well, let me get this written down the paper again, and just remind myself that nope, this is the order. I want it now on a sticky note in front of me, or on the Roll20 screen, so that I can quickly just look and say, all right, it's Cedric. He's got a higher intelligence and a decent dexterity, so he's going to be able to go. He's going to be able to go first because the tiebreaker is intelligence, and he had that. So again, little things like this are going to help you manage the large group a lot better. It'll allow you to keep it more orderly. It'll allow the players to be more engaged in what's going on. Is it always going to work? No. but it's certainly going to make it more, a lot easier for you to pull off running a large group. Now, I don't recommend that you jump right to, 9, 10, 12 players. No, you start off, especially for an early, a brand new DM, you know, 4 to 5 players max. All right, just learn how to maintain a very small group of players, each one playing just one character. Start off at first level. Always start off new players at first level. Always start off a new campaign at first level. Unless you're really familiar with the players at your table, but always start off at first level. That way, the characters are just that much easier to understand their capabilities, and what kind of equipment they're going to have will also be limited, because as a first level character, you don't have that much starting monetary funds, whether it's gold or whatever game you happen to be playing, and so there's just less for you to keep track of, less for you to think about as you're going through these things, and you can focus more so on what's actually happening in the action, and how can I potentially respond or change from what I originally intended to do and now do this. So I hope that was helpful. I will very quickly just show you. I mean, it's just very quickly how to keep a large group orderly and engaged, and just three points here: what the DM needs to know, what the player needs to know about the characters, and then the sequence. So those are the major parts of this. And as you can see, it's just a one pager. It's just that's all the the nuts and bolts of this idea. Create at least 2 ordered lists of PCs and 1 for the basic sequence for all interactions. All right, so, and as you can see, number 1 is the initiative order, number 2 is the leadership or declaration order, and number 3 is the order of sequence. Okay, so I will come out of that. So I hope you found that useful. Hope that answered your question on the channel, and I'll let you know. I'll shoot a little comment to you and say the new video is up, and hopefully you're subscribed and you have the alerts bell clicked on so that you'll get that alert anyway. But in case you haven't, please consider doing those. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. I know when I look at the analytics, it's kind of like strange to me. It's like, all right, so close to 50% of my viewership are not subscribed, but they do return. So it's not an onerous thing to hit that subscribe and hit that alert button so that the stuff is coming. I already know that you're coming back, so please just hit that subscribe, and it helps the channel out by just getting it more exposure, and getting alerts so that when things are hitting, and liking or just commenting also gets the algorithm kicking in, and the channel will get more exposure as well. It's been growing pretty well. I've been very, very happy with it. Have a great month. This past month was really, really good for the channel. So I do appreciate all of you that are coming in, including the visitors. I just encourage you to subscribe. And once again, have a great rest of your week. Stay safe out there, and I look forward to seeing you on a gaming screen sometime soon. You have a great evening. Take care.